Welcome to the fourth module. Now, this is about therapies. Now, therapies can be all different types of things. In this first one, we will be talking about prescription drugs and herbal remedies. Prescription medication. There is a high prevalence of mental health problems correlated with self-harm that can actually impact on your self-harm. How do we cope with this? Well, sometimes we actually offer prescription drugs. Prescription drugs are used for antidepressants, low-dose antipsychotics, and mood stabilizers. Each is different. Now, antidepressants are used in the same dose range as they are for depression. Yeah? So you've got to think depression, anti-depression. So the idea is we're trying to stop the depression by changing how the mind works. We do that with prescription drugs, antidepressants, low-dose antipsychotics. Antipsychotics have reduced heightened arousal. So if someone's hyper and we want to bring them down, or they're hyper more than 10 times a week, they probably need antipsychotics. These antipsychotics also it is one risk for self-harm. I'll come on to that in a minute. But you will be surprised that even though we give these drugs out to people, there are other implications. So mood stabilizers stabilize the mood. So for instance, bipolar disorder. Now bipolar means bi. It means they can go from one side to the other. That's one side to the other. The idea of mood stabilizers is to stabilize the mood so it stays static for more than 5 minutes a day if you can. And that's the idea of mood stabilizers. This is from the National Health Service. Our little elf. He actually is an elf. Yeah, believe it or not. When I first saw this, I couldn't believe it. I thought it was the National Health Service, but it's not, it's the National Health Service. A very good site, actually. Comorbidity. Now, I've mentioned this several times before. What is comorbidity? Comorbidity means that someone has 2 or more mental health mental health problems. I was going to say dissociative attributes, but I don't suppose you could put it that way. But disassociation means basically, they disassociate with one thing and another. So it's comorbid. Comorbidity means 2 relational problems. 2 relational problems, they also have a third one, self-harm. Therapies vary. Yeah? They can obviously be given prescription drugs. But as you can see, drugs that are often used for the treatment of self-harm are not as clear-cut as you would think. Why is that? Research suggests risk of recurrent overdose associated with chronic patterns of psychotropic medications after non-fatal overdose. That basically turned around and said there's a risk of overdose with these drugs. They don't know whether they've taken the drug. Maybe because the drug itself puts them into a certain state where they can't remember. Did I take my tablet this morning? No, I didn't. No. Let's make sure I take that one. Halfway through the day, I don't think I took my tablet this morning. I hope you understand the concept of what's going on here. They then go back and they take another one. It says on the pack no more than 6 in one day. Unfortunately, your self-harmer, because these drugs can actually put them into a psychotropic state, the psychotropic medication actually does exactly the opposite. It makes them forget things. And when they forget things, they go back and do the same thing again. Not because they are self-harming. Let's make this one point clear. It is not because they are self-harming that they are doing this. They are doing this for fear of self-harm. They're trying to stop themselves because the doctor has said to them, you need to take one of these tablets a day. It may be two, it depends. Some are stronger than others. So what they do is they think to themselves, okay then, I must make sure I take my one tablet. To stop themselves from self-harming and having self-harm thoughts, they forget that they took one at 4 o'clock in the morning and decide to take another one at 10. By the time 4 o'clock in the afternoon comes, they've taken another one. That pattern can happen, and unfortunately, they can overdose. And they can do it recurrently. Because these drugs put them into a comatose state, one way or another, and because they are psychotropic, they take away certain parts of your memory that you cannot use. Cognition you need for everyday life. Let's make that perfectly clear. If you cannot cognitively think on a regular basis, you are considered to either have a mental health disorder or a disorder that you cannot function normally in life. All of these, as you have seen, and as hopefully you realise by now, as you've gone through the course, can all be comorbid. We must not assume, however, that pharmacological drugs do not work. My argument here is that some people will be okay on these pharmacological drugs, some will not. That is why when you look at the leaflets for self-harm, you will find basically put one of the key components of these psychotropic drugs is self-harm. I found one where it turned around and said there is a risk of not only self-harm, but that's death, accidental death. So if you remember when we were going through that one there, risk of recurrent overdose, it could well be because of that factor. But basically they've taken too many. They shouldn't have done, and they know they shouldn't have done, but they've taken too many. But to stop self-harm, they've self-harmed themselves in another way. Indirectly. They didn't intentionally do this. Someone who intentionally goes out to try and commit suicide would intentionally take these drugs. Someone who self-harms will go, I've forgotten to take my pill, I've forgotten to take my pill, I've forgotten to take my pill. But there are studies now that giving children pharmacological drugs is dangerous. These drugs, in some cases, when you look through the leaflets, it says this should not be given to children under the age of 18. How many of you come across children that are on drugs that you would probably sit around and say, well, no, he needs it for his autism. He needs it for his dyslexia. He needs it for this. But most of those drugs, I can guarantee you, if you took out the leaflet, would say, do not give this drug to anyone under the age of 18. Which is worrying. One of the side effects, as I said, is self-harm. So you may have a situation where you have a child who didn't self-harm before, but now starts self-harming because of the drugs. I would argue that this person then is no good on these drugs. Not that the drugs are no good, it's that their metabolism will not allow them to actually have those drugs in their system long enough for them to work properly. So it's a counteraction within the stomach. That's what I believe. I'm hoping one day I can prove the point. But there are alternatives. herbal remedies. Herbal remedies, like pharmacological drugs, are designed to actually, in this case, increase serotonin. Serotonin helps you to actually find your fear factor. Yeah? Serotonin helps with fear. If you remember, when we went through one of the other ones, I showed you a list of the 4 chemicals in the brain, the 4 main chemicals, and serotonin was one of them. Now these other ones here are serotonin reuptake drugs. Now, a serotonin reuptake drug is not to make the serotonin more. It's to stop, point blank, the negative thoughts passing from the left side of the cerebral cortex to the right side of the cerebral cortex. That is it. It's to stop them altogether. The difference with herbal remedies is there's no side effects. There's none. So if you have that child who couldn't get on with those other drugs, you could say to them, all right then, fair enough, we'll try this instead. Let's try some serotonin drugs. You can buy them at Barrett's, any Boots chemists, Savers, they all do them. And they all vary in price. But obviously, you have to choose which one you think would be best for your self-harmer. If they're still self-harming after they're taking the other types of drugs, then obviously those drugs are not good for them. And not that they don't work, they can only work with certain people. I must make this point clear. I'm not saying do not stop drugs. What I'm saying is that there are alternatives for those that continue to self-harm after you've prescribed them pharmacological drugs. As I said, this is for brain functioning only. It increases the brain's awareness of, with serotonin, fear. So when it comes to someone wanting to self-harm, for instance, they will go and they will suddenly feel fear for the first time. Some of them have never felt fear at all, and they just run away. All day long, non-stop, all day long. And then they realise after the incident has happened, and they go back and they go, that did happen. They don't knowingly know that they're actually doing this. They just don't have the fear inside them to see they're doing this. And that is where serotonin drugs or serotonin herbal remedies can help that person, because it enhances their ideas and how they actually see the world. It will help in time, not straight away, to reduce self-harm incidents. There is very little research on the effectiveness of herbal remedies and their relation to helping those who self-harm. I found 2 articles relating to herbal remedies, but unfortunately they did what they did this. Researchers used both mixing the pharmacological drugs with their herbal remedies, though caution is needed here. Why? Because if you look on the side of the pharmacological drug, it will turn around and say to you, this drug should not be taken with any other thing that is enticed to enhance brain functioning. So if you then mix it with, unfortunately, the few cases that they did have, it actually increased the self-harm. It didn't reduce it in any way whatsoever, which was quite worrying. But so, you know, as the leaflets say this, you would have thought, oh, I'm going to do a test. I don't believe what they say. And obviously these researchers haven't looked at the actual leaflets, because the leaflets turn around and say, do not mix with anything else. It makes no difference whether there's no side effects with herbal remedies. It makes no difference. It's just do not mix. Both because there's certain ingredients, and this is where I think this is going on, there's certain ingredients inside herbal remedies, and there's certain ingredients inside pharmacological drugs that both work against each other. Completely. There's no format in between the two. And it does state on herbal remedy bottles that if your self-harmer is actually on pharmacological drugs, you should get them to take away the pharmacological drugs before you start herbal remedies. That's not straight away. You don't just stop it. Obviously, the system has actually got used to it, so what you do is you lower the amount you take each day over a period of time until you completely stop. Then you can administer herbal remedies. Not before. I must make this point clear. Not before. Because the ingredients that are in these, in these pharmacological drugs and these, don't work together very well. And they will not work together straight away. You can't just say, well, you can't have them no more. You will end up with a person who is completely distraught. So where they were having one tablet a day to stop this, is one tablet every other day, until you get down to naught. And then you can say, let's try these from the next day. Never the same day you start. Never. Because inside that person's body from the day before is still a certain amount of the pharmacological drug. So what will happen? You guessed. You have a very distraught person. Conclusion. More needs to be done if herbal remedies could have a significant improvement of self-harm. I believe they do. Never assume that taking any child off of pharmacological drugs will improve the likelihood of self-harm. It will not. If you've got self-harm and they're taking the pharmacological drugs to actually reduce the amount of times they self-harm, taking away those drugs, they're going to self-harm. They just revert back. There's no inhibitions there no more. The idea of drugs and herbal remedies is to reduce the occurrence of self-harm. Some, I would argue, do better than others. Ask your GP before taking a child off psychotropic drugs, as has been seen. Some self-harmers make the mistake of taking too many of the drugs, causing death. So if you know full well that they've taken psychotropic drugs and they have done what I said, they've forgotten and they've gone back, certain adults will allow teenagers to take their own drugs, and they say, well, that's it, you're responsible now, you have to understand this is what you've got to do. You must not take no more than one. Okay, I won't take no more than one. The minute they take their drug, because their brain is actually reduced, their brain function is reduced, and their cognition is reduced, they forget. I would argue that, up until at least the age of 25, even adults who tend to actually do this quite frequently, you should actually be turning around and saying to them, you can only take this today. People do not realise that they can actually cause harm to the individual they're trying to help. We here today are trying to stop that from happening. If you're worried and the pharmacological drugs didn't work and they were taking too many, ask your GP also, would it be a good idea to try the herbal remedies? If you ask the GP, remember this course is for parents and professionals. Just because you're all professionals doesn't mean we don't have parents on this course. Because you may be professionals and you also may be parents. That part I do know. So, remember, you can always change your mind after the trial period. So if it didn't work, the herbal remedies suggest to the GP they try a different pharmacological drug. Thanks for listening.